Good evening, everyone. We are going to begin in just a couple of moments. Okay. By a show of hands, either by waving like this or by using the virtual hand raise, how many folks have had a chance to see the film Exodus 91? Nice. Wonderful. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, and good evening. This post-film program for Exodus 91 is being recorded. Tonight, we do have a yummy door prize for one lucky audience member towards the end of our program tonight. So stay tuned for who that lucky winner is. I'd like to take a moment to thank our Film Festival committee who works tirelessly year-round to curate the festival experience each year. I'd also like to thank the sponsors of the film, Sarah and Lloyd Wisdom, as well as the Weintraub Israel Center, who supports who is supporting the film and tonight's post-film program. The Weintraub Israel Center is a proud partnership between the Tucson J and Jewish Philanthropies of Southern Arizona. And I'd like to thank all of our sponsors and community partners, and thank you to you, our audience, who is here with us this evening. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Tucson J President and CEO Todd Rockoff to moderate this evening's program. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you all for being here. I'm very excited about tonight's conversation, and we'll get started in a moment. I just want to let you all know that there will be opportunity for all of you to ask questions. Please use the chat function. You can chat to me directly or chat to Jen. If you're so inclined, you can chat to everyone, and we will do our best to get all of the questions answered as a part of our conversation tonight. I do find it meaningful that the conversation is taking place today on Martin Luther King Day here in the US. Dr. King once said, "We must use time creatively in the knowledge that there's always time to do what is right." This reminds me of the scene in the movie where Qasem Khadabi said to Asher, "Why do you want blacks in Israel?" And Asher said that Israel is the sovereign homeland of all Jews, and it is the right thing to bring all Jews there. So I want to welcome our speakers tonight, filmmaker Micah Smith and past Tucson shinshinit emissary Leah Yuval Genie. Thank you both for being with us this evening and part of this conversation, and especially thank you for getting up so early in the morning to spend time with us while we're all ready to get ready to go to bed. Micah, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to make this film?
Well, thank you, Todd, and your entire community for having me. It's a real honor to be here and to be able to screen my movie for your community. As you can tell from my accent, I'm not originally from Israel, but I do live in Israel right now. I made Aliyah in 2004. I grew up in Los Angeles, actually. I lived in New York for 5 years, and then I came here. As an Ole, as somebody who moved to Israel, I have a specific connection to this film. Definitely my experience of making Aliyah was very different than the experience of the Ethiopian Jews. And that's a part of the experience for me of making the movie. But I think that ultimately I was drawn to the movie because when I made Aliyah, I was 23, and I came to Israel with a tremendous amount of idealism, as one would expect from a 23-year-old. And I think that over the years, I became increasingly aware of the reality of the situation in Israel, which is a tremendously inspiring place to live, and has wonderful, wonderful things, but also has issues. And as I would travel back and forth between LA and Israel, I would frequently experience this sort of culture shock, especially when it comes to issues relating to the Ethiopian Israeli community. Los Angeles is a unique place in many ways. Ethnically, there's a tremendous amount of diversity, and Israel is also the incredible diversity we have in this country, albeit mostly within the context of the Jewish world. But as we are aware, Judaism, Jews have lived all over the world, and Israel is an incredibly diverse society. As to how such a young country such as Israel deals with that diversity and struggles with that diversity, America and Israel are completely different. And I felt like as I became aware of the complexity and the issues that remained in Israeli society, especially considering the protests that were going on and off over the years while I lived in Israel, I felt like I needed some way to explore that and to really unpack it for myself, to start to figure out what's similar between Israel and America, what's different between Israel and America, what can the two cultures learn from one another. And I felt like this character of Asher Naim could be a very interesting avenue through which to explore this. Somebody who's caught between two worlds, who's traveling between two worlds, who's seeing both cultures but not entirely understanding either culture, and somebody who could ask questions and who could get it wrong. I think I always thought it was funny that how much I identify with the character of Asher Naim, even though he's older than me, grew up in Libya, lived in a completely different time period, or largely a different time period. But for me, I feel like Asher is very much a stand-in for myself, somebody who's in another culture, a little bit lost, comes in with a tremendous amount of idealism to Ethiopia and a lot of misinformation, and then has to learn the hard way. I think that's sort of the description of almost all of us who moved to Israel.
That's fantastic, and thank you very much, Leah. It's great to see you, and we're so thrilled to be able to spend this time with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been doing, in short, and what you learned during your year here in Tucson as one of our valued and loved emissaries here?
So first of all, I missed you, Todd, and I missed everyone. So it's good to see some familiar faces. As of now, I'm a second-year student at Reichman University for government diplomacy and strategy, which means that this is one of the topics we talk a lot about when we speak about Israeli society and politics. So I grew up in Ethiopia. I was born in Ethiopia, and I made Aliyah when I was about 2 years old. I lived in a Merkaz Klita, Aliyah Center here in Israel, in the city of Lod for 2 years. And then we moved to Kiryat Malachi, which is where I live at the moment as well. And my Aliyah story was very, very complicated. Some of you got to hear it. Maybe I'll tell the whole story later on. But at the end of the day, most of the Aliyah stories from Ethiopia are the same. Families got separated because of the complicated Aliyah process, because of the government in Ethiopia, because of the soldiers of Sudan. So everything you see in the film is pretty accurate, and it's sad, but I know so many stories outside of my family that we share the same struggles. And one of the things I did in Tucson in my year of service there was talking about my family, my Aliyah process, the difference of the Ethiopian Aliyah from the other Aliyah or Aliyot, and basically how and what do we need to do here in Israel to close the gaps, the cultural gaps, the social gaps, And that's one of the things that I work on today as well, by volunteering in the Ethiopian community here in Netanya, with kids and with adults. And that's what I focus on at the moment.
That's wonderful. And thank you. Thank you for all of that. You know, so interestingly, as I was watching the movie, I was thinking back many, many years ago when I was a young professional in Scranton and the Federation was running this campaign for Operation Solomon. And it was really the first special campaign that I participated in my 20s. And watching the film, and certainly Leah, learning from you while you were here, we had this sense of everything is perfect and we're just doing this perfect thing. And then to watch over time and learn over time and be open to that learning as to what has come, both good and the challenges, I think is an important story. So Micah, appreciate your bringing this story not just to us, but to a much wider audience. For both of you, when Asher first went to Ethiopia and he was sitting in the car, he mentioned that he always wanted to be a Zionist activist. I guess I'm asking, what does that mean to you? Because it certainly had a meaning to me, and it obviously did to him. But what does it mean in your world to be a Zionist activist?
I guess I'd say that I think in his mind at that time, to be a Zionist activist is to be a completely faithful missionary of the state of Israel. I think that he came from a world which is very different than ours, obviously. And I think that as being in the foreign ministry, working for the government, he had been brought to Israel by these, idealized Zionist activists who had gone to Libya. I mean, and at the time, obviously, it was before the state of Israel. These Zionist activists with these, they were like superheroes traveling all over the world, bringing the lost Jews back home, which I can't imagine. I mean, it's crazy, bringing them to this country that didn't even exist yet when he was brought back. I think that I think that it speaks to so much of what we experience being educated about Israel, especially in the diaspora. We get a certain narrative whenever we outside of Israel experience Israel, because we're removed and we're relying on somebody else so often to tell us that story, whether it's the news, whether it's the educational system. And I think that's really a central part of what the movie is exploring, trying to understand how narrative is used for all different reasons, for political purposes, for nationalistic purposes, for identity purposes, for building the Jewish people, for undermining the Jewish people. That's really what the movie is unpacking. And so much of the movie, they're talking about, do you trust his story? What's the story here? What's the story we're going to tell? I think that ultimately is then boiled down in the movie itself. Here is a movie that is telling the story of Operation Solomon. And to some extent, I wanted the audience to ask the question of, what is poetic license here? What is the true story? What is the false story? Why are these filmmakers telling this story? I wanted to include my voice directing the action. What is this essentially? Who is this white guy, this American guy whose accent maybe we can even tell from hearing him yelling in the background of the movie as we break the fourth wall? Why is he here? I wanted the audience to ask all those questions. When it comes to poetic license, did you ask the question about poetic license? Yes?
I'm going to, but yes.
Oh, but you didn't yet. Okay. Sorry, you asked about Zionist being
an activist, but I think it leads right into that. So I think
okay.
that
Sorry.
Certainly, I'm going to come back to that because I want to ask Leah a question as I want to tack on, Leah, for you to the Zionist activist part. Tell us a little bit about the world today, and some of the tensions that exist today. And I think they kind of got previewed, whether this was licensed or not, Micah, in the scene that I referenced earlier, about Asher talking about how it's the right thing to do to bring everyone, and we're fully behind it. And Schwartzy saying that, they want to test this and they want to test that and they want to keep everyone out. So I think that very much demonstrated that even then there was this internal tension within Israel. So Leah, talk a little bit about the tension that exists today.
The tension, meaning
With the Ethiopian community and
inside of the society.
Yes.
So I think we also have to divide, speaking about the tension, because there is some tensions and some problems socially between one another. And then there is the system, the government, the police, all the authorities that did not necessarily know how to have us, how to take us and throw us in the Israeli society. As I said, we're coming from a different background than most of the Jews that already were here. So we didn't necessarily came with the education of the first world. We didn't have the language or the cultural manners, or we were lacking a lot of things in order to mix well with the Israeli society. And on top of everything, we are Black. So that's not something that you can hide. Not that you want to, but that's not something that you can hide. So the klita process, I forgot how to say klita. Maybe I should go back to Tucson for a while. But the process of us getting in the Israeli society was very complicated. And today I can tell you that as of a young adult here, it's very, very mixed feelings, because you don't know what to put first. Are you Ethiopian or are you Israeli? Or is it just Jewish and you live in the state of Israel and that's it? Like a lot of questions about self-identity come up with the young adults here, as we come from two different worlds and we have to combine both of our parents' world and the things we want to. I can speak about myself and myself only, but I believe I represent a lot of people from the same background. I'm the first person in my family to ever get a degree, an academic degree. So it's something that you have to be the first one to do it. It's always about the first Ethiopian to be IDF soldier or officer, or the first Ethiopian doctor. So at this point, Ethiopian people are all across the Israeli society and politics and private companies, and Ethiopian people have a very, very good and amazing achievements, and I don't see us as different, but there is a lot of things we need to fix. And today, there was actually a video posted by the Hamas of an Ethiopian Israeli citizen called Avera Mengistu, which has been captive for almost 8 years. And when they published the video, I could see the comments and the reply from the Israeli society, which a lot of them didn't even know about it, or they only knew a little about it. And you can't ignore the question of maybe we don't talk about it enough and the media doesn't talk about it enough because it's an Ethiopian citizen and not a white Israeli citizen. So that's things that are still chasing you, and you still wonder if that's why you can't succeed or that's why you can't do what you do. But I can tell you that the Ethiopian community also brought a lot of Zionism, of pure Zionism, pure love to the state of Israel, to Eretz Israel. It's more than politics. It's something much deeper. And Micah said that they brought us to Israel. And that's something that we try to fix in the last few years. No one brought us. We brought ourselves, and we had I'm not fixing you, Micah. I appreciate you what you do. But I think that's one of the small things that makes the whole difference. So now we're focusing on educating all kids about the leaders of the Ethiopian community, Ferede Aklum, Yona Bugala, amazing leaders that's worked with the Mossad and the soldiers, and they did everything in order for us to come to Israel. So that's another thing that we're putting the spotlight on. And yes.
No, that's great. So I want to ask you both, and Leah, I'll start with you because last time I started with Micah. Zionism is both a place and an idea. Can you reflect on this thought? Because you just talked about pure Zionism. So what is Zionism as both a place and an idea?
I think that for me and for what I grew up on, the values that I have, Zionism is not even an idea. It's just who you are. That's your identity. So it's not something that you can take and you're like, oh, that's a nice idea. I will adopt it. No, it's like the first word you say is Zion, Zion, before mom, before dad, before anything else. When you grow up in an Ethiopian household, it's more than a religion. It's more than ethnicity. It's more than anything. It's who you are. And it's not. It sounds very, very strict, but it's about understanding Judaism to its fullest, the values that Judaism bring, which is people coming together, and it's helping everyone, not just Jewish people, and it's of course living in Israel. So I think that for us, it's just a way of life. And when we came to Israel, when I traveled to outside of Israel for the first time, that's when I was introduced to the idea of not recognizing Israel and all the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and all of those things. And I think that one of the things that proves that Jewish people have a connection to Israel is the Ethiopian community. We were completely disconnected from the rest of the world, from the rest of the Jewish world for thousands of years, and we still prayed to the direction of Jerusalem. We still believed in Israel and Jerusalem and the Jewish people. So it's something that sticks with us, and I don't even see it as an idea. I see it as it's my way of life. It doesn't matter who I marry, what I do. It doesn't matter. If you're Jewish, you have values that stick to you, and you just live by them.
That's beautiful. You've left me without words, so I appreciate that. Micah, would you like to, from your perspective, then coming both from the U.S. and making this film, do you want to reflect on the place and idea, and maybe just it's in your neshama, and that's all it is?
Right. Definitely my inclination is not to follow up on Leah's beautiful words there. That's a hard one to follow. I do think that ultimately Zionism is a political, when you get down to it, is a political ideology. There are many forms of Zionism. There are revisionist Zionists. We can learn about all of the different forms of Zionism. I think that there's only one land of Israel. There's only one place of Israel and place of Zion, which of course that would be Jerusalem, not all of Israel, which is a distinction which a lot of people aren't even aware of. But I think that while we can each have our own form of Zionism, or people can be anti-Zionist or different conceptions of Zionism, when it comes down to it, this place is what binds the Jewish people together and has bound us together for millennia. And I think that if we can continue to be rooted in our land, then we will truly flourish.
Beautiful. So I do want to ask a film question. It was in the chat, and actually I had been noodling this around as well. In terms of the film itself, which I loved, the content and the quality, I appreciated your choice to break the fourth wall. Why was that a choice, and what goes into making a choice like that when you're making film?
So I started to speak about it before. the decision to break the fourth wall came from a few places. One was essentially this meta conversation that I wanted the movie to engage in. Who's making this movie? Why is this movie being made? What's the narrative that they're telling? And I think, to put it crassly, how are they manipulating that narrative? Film is always a form of manipulation. And the question is, for good or evil, is it good for the Jews or bad for the Jews? I think that when it originally started, because we were trying to put this movie together, little did we know that COVID was coming when we first started, but it became a godsend because but at the time when we were just trying to figure out the budget of the movie and how we were going to produce it, the producers were saying, like, well, how much of this can we shoot in Israel? And as we started to piece it together, we realized that we could shoot the entire movie in Israel, which is a very Hollywood thing to do, obviously. If anyone's been to LA and the Universal Studios tour or something like that, making a movie in one place and presenting it as a different place is a very movie thing to do. It's very much not a documentary thing to do. That would be completely, insane to do in a documentary. But as a filmmaker, I felt like that was something I wanted to invite the audience into, to be aware of, that this was the Hollywoodization of the Operation Solomon story, and that here we are showing that these are sets. This is not real. This is a story. This is filmmaking. That then comes to head in at least two places, if I can remember both of them. The first is, obviously, it allowed us to transition fluidly from the storytelling of 1990 and 91 to the protests in Israel. To be able to follow an actress, Esther, from the scene in the car, and then follow her out of the studio and out into the streets of Israel. I think that's a brilliant bit of writing from our screenwriter Eitan Aner, and we wouldn't be able to do that if we had filmed in Israel, and we wouldn't have been able to do it if we hadn't been breaking the fourth wall and introducing the audience to that. I think that in addition, it was a way for us. People complain about it sometimes, but I wanted the audience to experience this feeling of being pulled out of the story, of being able to be sort of objective for a moment. Oh, these are actors. Like, hey, we're being honest here. We're being completely honest about what's going on. We keep reminding you that's a story. What I think is so amazing about films is that you can keep reminding the audience that it's fake. Like, I guess we experience it in terms of commercial. We used to experience it in terms of commercial breaks when we watch television. And then when we dive right back into that story, we are sucked right back in. We're still moved. We can still laugh and cry, even though we know it's not a real, we're not seeing something real. And that's the true power of narrative, is to be able to grab us and give us an experience no matter what.
Well, I candidly love that. And I love that you actually took a different dimension. And that, to me, the picture of Shimon Peres and Prime Minister Shamir, like in real film, not that your film's not real, but in real time from the early 90s, just the way the juxtaposition of the actors, the fourth wall in that were really brilliant. So I thank you for that. Leah, can you talk a little bit about your early memories of leaving Ethiopia? And you started to say that you would talk a little bit about your story. So if you don't mind, I think we all would enjoy learning from you.
Of course. So I was born in a city called Gondar in Ethiopia, and my mother actually, my mother's family already made Aliyah in 1991. And my father's side of the family also made Aliyah very early. So my mother stayed there as a young girl, and my dad as well. and they didn't have really a lot of family members there. And when I was 2 years old, my mother had me when she was 15, I have to say, which was normal, don't worry. When I was about 1 and a few months, she decided that she's making aliyah with me. She has no reason to stay. No Jewish people in the area left. All the Jewish cemeteries, all the Jewish synagogues, everything is just empty. So she decided she's moving to Israel. She came with me. She was 17 and I was 1 and a few months, as I said, almost 2 years. We lived in a Markaz Klita. So for the first 2 years, for us, it was just like being in Ethiopia because everyone around you spoke Amharic and you had the same traditional foods and culture, and you still did the same things, just in a different location. And when I first was introduced to the Israeli society, I was about 5 or 6. Well, like one of the first few times my mother left me alone, and I realized that I'm speaking a different language than what other people speak in. So for me, it was a very slow transformation to being Israeli. My mother is a very good example. She came here when she was 17, and she grew up with me and grew up in Israel. So I have both this perspective of a teen mom, and me as someone who came in a very early age, and I can see the differences between us because intellectually my mother could still learn a new language and could still get used to new things, especially her. She's very smart, but still she had very, very, very difficult. It could be small things like going on a bus and the bus driver telling you something that you don't understand and the frustration of that. And it can be bigger things like racism, and that's something that she faced every day, almost every day at the beginning here. Now it's like you still see it, but much less. And we have a voice now; we can answer back. But for her, I know that one of the things she wanted the most is that I will not go through the same things that she did. So I can understand it from one point, saying we just got reunited with the rest of the family. We saw how I have aunts and uncles that were born after I was born here in Israel. So I could see how their lifestyle is like and what our lifestyle is like. And there was big parts. And my mother always told me that I should always remain with my Ethiopian identity, in the sense of culture and manners and deeper ideas, like sharing and appreciating what you have and stuff like that. But also I have to jump in the water and go do things for the first time. So I can say that my siblings experience less struggles than I am struggling. So that's a good thing. That's something that means that we are in a progress, and the Israeli government knows how to treat new Olim from Ethiopia now. And I think, was it last year? Yeah, 2022 was there was a very big aliyah from Ethiopia because of the war between the Tigrayan and the Amharics that are going in Ethiopia. But that's government studies that I'm studying now, and it's coming up. But so now I can see the difference. I can see how the new Olim learn the language quick, and how if there is a racist case of a person that didn't want to rent an apartment for Ethiopian couple, now everyone is mad, and the whole society completely supports us. So that's something that we had to work on. But talking about the 2015 protests that were here in Israel, I think that's something that the whole world heard of, about police brutality. So there are some topics that we still have to speak about, and I have to speak about with my younger siblings. But for the most part, there is a progress, and it's easier for them than it was for me and my mother.
It's really even though it was something you aspired to do, there was a lot of courage. You were like Nachshon. You jumped into the water first. You jumped in first, and you have you and society together have made it easier for those, hopefully, that continue to come, and there continues to be that open door. Mike, did Casa Kadabi really try to steal the money that was meant for the Ethiopian government, or was that just an illustrative piece that you were trying to show?
So, I guess I would say, I don't know if when we watch the movie, we know if Casa is trying to steal the money or not, but the story is true, meaning he came to the hotel to transfer the money, and he had a bank account which was not correct, and they were very worried that he was trying to steal the money, or that somebody was trying to steal the money, because it was certainly hard not to want to steal that money. And he had to leave and go out and get another bank account number and bring it back. So all of that is what happened. Obviously, the dialogue of what goes on is built out a bit from what happened in reality. But when the general consensus is that in the chaos of what was going on in the government and the fog of war and all of these other things, he really did and the American government like closing down accounts, and the Ethiopian government trying to open new accounts so that they can work with the international community, that there was just some sort of snafu when it came to the bank accounts. And he was financially remunerated for his services separately. So to some, he did make out quite well from the whole story, and was able to, thanks to the Israelis, he was able to escape to Israel on the last plane out, and lived the rest of his life in the United States after a brief stint in Israel.
Well, I think it's fortuitous, as you said, that you also had a chance to actually have him in the film, and unfortunately Asher had passed away, and his brother, I think, probably had the great honor of portraying him.
Yeah, he was very excited. We certainly worked him more than he was expecting. When we first started making the movie, we were not expecting to do that. And in the editing process, as I really started to understand the way that the movie was exploring this idea of poetic license and exploring this idea of narrative and what's true and what's not true, I thought that staging essentially a fake interview, except that where all of the content comes from a deep place of truth, would be a great manifestation of the questions that the movie was talking about on a meta level.
It was really, really terrific. I appreciated it. I want to pause for a second and just see, I know we've got maybe about 10 minutes left in our time. I see a question came in because I was going to invite you all to do that. From a certain point of view, Asher's response to, was there a temple in Israel? And the question got cut off there, but can you talk a little bit maybe about, Leah, maybe what your family had heard about the temple?
Yeah, sure. My grandfather, it may sound very weird or naive, but most of the Ethiopian community, at least in the villages of my mother and father, believe that Israel is the land of honey and milk, meaning there are gold, how do you call them? Fountains with the milk and honey, and the Bet HaMikdash, the temple, is existing, and everyone lives together, and which it's pretty similar to how they lived in Ethiopia. They dressed up just like our Kesim, our religious leaders were dressed like the Kohanim, and everything you did, even the Sigd holiday that we also got to celebrate in Tucson, which is 50 days after Yom Kippur, when you dressed all white, and it's a fast, and it's very much like they lived in the Torah, like in the Tanakh. Like that's the stories I heard in schools were the images I have from pictures and from memories of my community. So I think that they really believe that they are coming to the country that they waited for. And again, that's why I'm saying that politics is not even a factor here for me, because it was just pure Israel, like just like in the Torah said, just like the Tanakh said, that we will all get reunited and to trust Hashem. So that's what they discovered. So when they came here and they had to pay bills and they had to do all those meaningless things for them, it was very weird for them. And on top of that, they couldn't do it by themselves. So the kids, we helped our parents to go to the bank and have a doctor appointment and have a car and all those materialistic stuff for them. It was devastating. It was very heartbroken periods for them. And also the racism didn't add any good value to that. So I think that they had a very, very innocent and naive thought and hope. And they came here and they were disappointed. There is no other way to say it. Now they appreciate it and it's different, but yeah.
But it had to be a shock when you expect to come and everything will be perfect, and then you experience complications in spite of the fact that it's where you want to be and you want to stay there. So I think it's an ongoing process of evolution and growth. Micah, in the chat, Deanna, who's one of our valued committee members, said that her grandfather was Joseph Naim, and he grew up in Libya. So maybe offline, Jennifer, you can help make the connection, because it would be really neat to explore whether or not it's the same family. It would certainly seem that it may well have been. So Jennifer is saying absolutely. So definitely. Offline, you all can do that. And that's just the wonderful thing about Jewish peoplehood, is that we all in some way or another can find this beautiful connection one to another. So I thank you for that. As we're getting ready, and I invite you to all look in the chat because there's some great commentary going on. Micah, Leah, what's next for each of you? Leah, what I know you're in school, you're working on your degree. What's next?
For me, finishing my degree and starting my MA, and hopefully at the end of the road, I see myself as a shagrira, as an emissary of in the foreign affairs ministry, or working at the Jewish Jaffa, forgot the name, הסוכנות היהודית לארץ ישראל, the Jewish Agency for Israel. Or something that involves both politics and social activism, specifically on the topic of Israel and the rest of the world.
Fantastic. Micah, any projects in the works? Anything in the can?
In terms of large scale films, I think I'm still working through my PTSD from making this film. Making a feature film is an incredibly challenging experience, and this was 5 years of my life. What I'm focusing on nowadays is short form content on YouTube. I work with an amazing organization called Open Door Media, and we have a YouTube channel that's full of shorter form content that explores Israel and Zionism and the history of the Jewish people. And for the most part, we try to have a similar approach of really embracing complexity and the complexity of narratives, multiple narratives, as well as just really opening the hood of the Jewish people's story and really seeing what's going on in there, for better or for worse. That's our vision for the channel. It's called Unpacked. So I certainly encourage people to check out Unpacked on YouTube.
Okay, so just to keep everyone with me as we're wrapping up, I'm going to ask one more question. We have a raffle winner that I'm going to announce, and then I just have a few wrap-up comments. So well, actually I have two questions. Is this being shown in Israel? So I don't know what this is, but is Exodus 91 being shown in Israel?
As of now, the movie is being distributed in the US. We had a few screenings in Israel, and there are like private screenings in Israel, but we don't have like a signed distribution deal with an Israeli channel.
And in a couple of words, what was most challenging about making this film then?
Oh my God. I feel like my therapist could answer this better than I could. I think the most challenging thing about making this movie is the weight of representing a culture which is not one that I grew up in, and especially in the political climate today, I was very, very concerned about directing this movie and trying to as an outsider present the Ethiopian Jewish community and culture. I worked very closely with advisors from the community, but it was still really, really scary, and there were still both mistakes that we made as well as choices that we had to make. I actually wrote an article for the LA Jewish Journal about the scene with the Kess. When he's sitting with the Kess, we had a whole back and forth over eye contact between the Kess and the ambassador, because we started to shoot the scene and the Kess was looking down, or the actor, or not actor. He's actually a famous Ethiopian Israeli radio host and academic and activist, Rachamim Elazar. But he was looking down as we were shooting the scene, and I said, "Well, I need you to look up. The audience can't see your eyes, and we're making a movie here." And he said, "No, that would be way too disrespectful." So then we have to stop production with 100 crew members sitting around as we have like a philosophical discussion about whether we should have him lift his eyes, how he should lift his eyes, how he should engage the character of Asher in a way that would be authentic to the Ethiopian Israeli community and to their culture, and at the same time serve as an effective form of translation to the diaspora community, to people who aren't connected to that culture and don't have the same cultural reference points. But for me, that was terrifying, and for ultimately, I said I hope that the Ethiopian Israeli community can watch the movie and not be frustrated when seeing it, in the same way that I'm frustrated when I see Jews in Hollywood film. Well, that's not how they would really behave, or that's not how Orthodox Jews would really behave. But hopefully it's close enough, and will ultimately, my goal was to inspire dialogue, to inspire questions, to make people ask. And my hope is that everybody who sees this movie learns so much after watching the movie and does so much research that they all think that I'm a complete idiot and got everything wrong, because that would mean that they are truly educated at that point and have a deep connection to the Ethiopian Jewish community. And that would be much better than me getting it right ultimately.
Well, Micah, I do want to say I think you did great. I had the pleasure. I watched the movie literally 3 times. So I feel a deep connection to what you've done. I want to go back as we start to wrap up to something that Leah said in her description of Zionism and the way that Zionism and Jewish life are so intertwined. And as we have the pleasure of bringing the Weintraub Israel Center to the J, our strategy is just that, to make sure that as we're talking about Israel, we're talking about Jewish life and learning in the same breath, because the connection is deep and the connection is real. And we've adopted a philosophy around Zionism 3.0 that says we want unity, not uniformity. We want to hear from a diversity of voices, and we want to engage as equal partners with ourselves and with Israel. And I think this and many other events will hopefully amplify that. Leah, Micah, I want to thank you for such an inspirational conversation around Jewish life, peoplehood. Jennifer is going to put in the chat a link to view the brochure so you can look at other films through the end of this month. I want to say with excitement, Linda Fowler, you have won the door prize, and you have a gift card to Ziman's is Ethiopian restaurant here in Tucson. Leah and I have eaten there together, so you're going to have a wonderful, wonderful meal. Mazal Tov, and I wish everyone a wonderful evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us. Thank you so much. Thank you, Micah, for all that you did and you do. And thank you, Todd, Jennifer. Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure, and it was worth waking up at 4 a.m.
Lehitrot.
Later.